The information shared in this episode is not intended to serve as a substitute for mental health services and is only intended to provide education and information to you, the listener. Hey, this is Vena. Thank you for listening to the Honey Bee podcast. This is part 2 of a 2-part series on complex trauma. In this episode, I will be chatting about ways that a parent or caregiver can provide help to a child who has experienced repetitive and prolonged trauma, also known as complex trauma. So you are parenting a child that has experienced complex trauma, and they are struggling more often than not. They have relationship difficulties with their peers, challenges in keeping their attention and focus during class time, and they are described as oppositional, especially by their teachers and authority figures. The youth may be jumpy, tense, and fearful in situations where there is no real threat to their safety. They may have sleep difficulties or even difficulties with elimination after having successfully potty trained. This is due to the overwhelming stress that they are under. They may react in a really big way to a minor amount of stress and misunderstanding. They may have a negative response in situations that are usually responded to in a pleasant and joyful way. For example, getting praise or a reward for positive behavior may induce a lot of shame in that child. The child may seem distracted, detached, and anxious, or perhaps the kid may shut down or numb out, seeming to freeze in harmless and unoffending moments. You might be thinking that there is no way to help the child or no way to improve the situation. As a parent, you may be worried that things will never get better for you, the child, or the family as a whole. You are concerned and you are feeling defeated. You want to be of support to the youth and help them heal, but you don't know where to begin. Here are a few things that can be helpful to reduce the unpleasantness of the situation. First, I would like to thank Dr. Matthew Kliethermes and his colleagues for creating a journal article entitled Complex Trauma. I would also like to thank the childwelfare.gov website for creating a fact sheet for parents entitled Parenting a Child Who Has Experienced Trauma. Before we get into it, it's important for me to name that the role of the family and social environment will play a huge factor in the healing and resilience of a child who has experienced complex trauma. The more hostile and coercive the child's environment was, the more likely the youth will have post-traumatic symptoms, as well as internalize their emotions. So, warmth and skillful parenting will help a child cope adequately under times of distress. So even though I'm naming this, it's also important for me to name that there is no such thing as a perfect parent, no matter how many books you read, no matter how many episodes of my podcast that you listen to, and I do thank you for tuning in, please know that you will make mistakes. The goal is not to be a perfect parent at all. The practice is being a skillful, supportive, consistent, and predictable parent. Again, these qualities are tremendously beneficial to the youth and is super helpful in the process of healing. So here are 9 things to get you started on the journey of healing. Be mindful of the following and practice, practice, practice. Number 1, practice tolerating the child's affect. Please avoid physical punishment and practice not taking the behavior personally. This is a tall order that I'm inviting you to consider. I won't be there in person when the youth is having a big burst of emotional expression or behaving in a way that is not their baseline. It is because they're under stress, they are feeling overwhelmed, and their body is still reacting very strongly to their history of complex trauma. So I invite you to practice tolerating the child's affect. Practice remembering that this kiddo has gone through a tremendous amount of uncertainty, lack of safety, and emotional, physical, and mental anguish. Stay connected, both emotionally and physically. When a child has experienced complex trauma, begins to have a big burst of emotional and behavioral dysregulation, which is a fancy way of saying out of control to the max, there may be an urge as a parent to withdraw from the relationship. And this is understandable. Again, being with big emotional and behavioral expression from a child is not easy and can be taxing in many ways. And remember that a child who is away from their parent or caregiver, especially once that parent has identified that they are a safe and secure attachment figure, time away from that person following a big emotional blowout will only enhance the youth's sense of being unworthy of love. It will amplify their shame, intensify feelings of sadness, and tear down their ability to create healthy attachments with others. My suggestion is to respond, not react. Practice this idea by keeping a calm tone. Remember to acknowledge the youth's feelings. Validation reduces frustration. When a person has their emotional experience validated, that does reduce the intensity of their emotional experiencing, especially when those emotions are unpleasant and overwhelming. Reassure the child that they are safe in the present moment. Now, this suggestion makes me think of Julie Alvarado. She is a licensed professional counselor and trauma-informed consultant who is based in Boulder, Colorado. Some while back, she completed a training that I had the good fortune of hearing. And in that training, she shared a piece of advice that I will never forget. She shared that in a moment of parenting a child who had experienced complex trauma before living with her and her family, that there was this big burst of emotional expression on the heels of a family disagreement. Instead of becoming dysregulated with the child, she completed opposite action. She shared that she lowered her voice, she changed her posture in a way that seemed non-threatening to the youth, and that helped with reducing the youth's perspective of being under attack. She shared that this helped the child gain an ability to regulate their emotions in a way that allowed them to move past this incident without it getting out of control. Valuable, wise information from Julie Alvarado. The next idea that I have for you is to learn what triggers the youth, whether that be certain smells, certain sounds, the escalation of a person's voice, whatever the triggers are to the kiddo having a big burst of emotion or a big moment of shutting down. Practice being mindful of noticing what those factors are so that you then begin to have more of an ability to shape the environment to reduce any trauma triggers happening for the youth. Next, I want you to practice regulating your own response. Take a mindful moment to practice getting calm, to balance your thoughts, and to get regulated. This is a super cool thing to do, not only because you're taking time to regulate your feelings, which simply feels good, you're also modeling skillful behaviors for the child. This is surely a win-win situation. When you, as the parent, begin to practice self-regulation, you are creating the foundation to engage in co-regulation with the child, which I will share more about in a moment. Believe and validate the child's experience of trauma. Please let the child know that it is typical to have an array of emotions after experiencing something traumatic. Now, for some parents out there, you might have adopted a child or you are fostering a child who had been in an environment that was chaotic and unpredictable, and that youth constantly had some threat to their safety. You might be in the situation where that child who experienced an egregious amount of emotional and mental pain expresses love and care for that offending parent. Even if it makes the hair on the back of your neck rise up, please be mindful to acknowledge and validate that kid's emotional reaction to their experience of trauma. On the other hand, you may be in the situation where the kid is expressing how much they hate their offending parent and they are expressing a lot of resentment. Please don't tell them that they're supposed to like and love their parent. I encourage you to consider the pros and cons of getting that youth connected to a licensed mental health professional that can help them process these very complex emotions. In that situation of being present to a child who is expressing a lot of rage, resentment, and hate towards that offending parent, I invite you to consider going after the emotion, right? So moving past what is clearly observed, which is anger, and going after the root of that emotion, which is more than likely disappointment, grief, sadness, that sort of thing, and saying, I can totally understand why you feel sad about what happened to you, and I'm so sorry that it happened. Regardless of where the child is at in terms of expressing their experience of trauma, please take their reaction seriously with care and reassure them that who they are as a person had nothing to do with their being victimized. Please encourage them to express their feelings about their experience. Now, we are on to practicing the art of co-regulating with your child. So co-regulating, fancy way of saying being on the same wave as your child emotionally. So think of a person who is having really big emotional reactions to something. And this is an unpleasant emotional reaction. And think about that moment where you met them, fire meeting fire, with that same intensity, that same passion, that same dysregulation. I guarantee you that it didn't calm down immediately, right? And I invite you to think about the same scenario where there's someone with a big amount of emotional expression that is unpleasant, it's uncomfortable, and it just doesn't feel good. And when you happen to respond in a more gentler, balanced, calm way, how much quicker that person's reaction de-escalated. That's what I mean when I say co-regulate with your child. So, a while ago, I encouraged you as the parent or caregiver to practice getting yourself regulated, calm in your thoughts, calm in your emotions. Those same strategies that you practice, so long as they're skillful, and of course they are, those strategies that you practice, I encourage you to practice those things with your child. So if that means you are sitting with the child watching television, close proximity to them, or listening to calming music, or maybe you are holding the child, or maybe you are meditating with the child, something that is calm, doing that with the child is what I mean when I say practice co-regulating with your child. They will thank you for it, and the relationship will have amazing attachment bonds as a result. Before I move on, it's really important for me to say that there are many theories on attachment that suggest that it is a biological urge for children to seek comfort from a caregiver in situations that that child perceives as frightening or dangerous. Through secure attachment with a trusted caregiver, children learn how to appropriately regulate their emotions and make sense of what is happening in their environment. This sort of attachment will reduce the overwhelming stress that is associated with complex trauma. Practice allowing the youth to make age-appropriate choices. Doing so will help them develop a sense of control over their own lives. This is referred to as internal locus of control in the world of psychology. Having choices in life and learning from the choices that we make will allow the youth to develop confidence in themselves, confidence in their ability to influence the outcome of their life, and will lead them to have a healthy self-esteem. And finally, a kid's ability to recover from trauma depends greatly on the quality of support they receive from their family, their community, and from the other meaningful relationships they have. Consider getting the youth, as well as yourself, connected with a licensed mental health professional who can further assist you on the journey towards healing. Thank you all for listening to today's episode. Please check out my website, myhoneybeetherapy.com. Like my Facebook page, you can find me there by the name of Honeybee Behavioral Health. Please hit me up via email at honeybeebehavioralhealth@therapist.net. Also, do me a super huge favor and subscribe to my channel so that you can listen to the new episodes from the Honeybee podcast when they drop. Until next time, peace.